Have you ever booted up an arcade game and seen this splash screen? Heard one of these many jingles? What exactly is QSound? Well, that's exactly what I asked myself recently. I ended up going down a huge rabbit hole of information and thought, there's a video in this. The QSound technology was created by QSound Labs. Its Wikipedia description describes QSound as a positional three-dimensional sound processing algorithm from QSound Labs that creates 3D audio effects from multiple monophonic sources and sums the outputs to two channels for presentation over regular stereo speakers. To simplify, it creates 3D audio effects and outputs them in stereo, i.e. to two speakers. The technology is manipulating certain aspects of the audio to simulate different spatial positioning. The most understandable aspect of this tech, for me at least, is panning, when a sound pans from left to right or vice versa. The panning sound is created by the manipulation of the audio's amplitude. This is essentially simulating what your ears do when a sound is heard off to the side. If I hear a sound from my right side, the sound wave travels to my right ear first, then my left. Because the amplitude of the wave decreases by the time it reaches the other ear, my brain knows that the sound has come from that direction. QSound doesn't just manipulate the amplitude, it's tweaking other aspects of the sound too. This is a huge oversimplification because, in all honesty, I don't fully understand what QSound is doing to the audio over just the regular panning, which would just slowly increase or decrease the audio in each speaker. Here it's producing two separate components for each speaker, one passed directly to the speaker and one passed through a digital filter. If you want to know more and are more technically minded than me, there's more info on the technology online. Fundamentally, QSound is taking certain sounds in a mix and making them sound like they're outside of the normal soundstage. What is soundstage? Well, soundstage is how well your audio gear can recreate the sense of three-dimensional sound. This is an important consideration when buying headphones for me, as a good pair of headphones will create a simulated 3D sound environment, the soundstage. This allows you to pick out individual instruments and sounds, to hear where certain instruments are. A good demonstration of this, if you're interested, is the track Money for Nothing by Dire Straits, which has quite a dynamic soundstage, great for testing out headphones. Hence QSound is virtual audio. So QSound was a precursor to modern 3D audio technologies and has since been superseded by tech like the various Dolby offerings like Atmos and DTS and so on, although most are geared towards 5.1 speaker setups. QSound was designed specifically to work with a two-speaker setup. You may hear some of the effects on good headphones, but the best way to experience it is to use two positioned speakers and sit in the sweet spot, i.e. right in the centre. This is how it was intended to work. This is why many arcade cabs from that era have stereo speakers positioned in this way. This flyer for Capcom's QSound arcades shows various cabs that have this stereo speaker setup, which are designed in such a way that the player will be standing in the sweet spot when playing the game. More on that later. But QSound was used in more than just games. In fact, the first QSound chip for video games wasn't created until 1991, while QSound itself was developed in the 1980s. It was used on quite a few albums. If you want to see a more comprehensive list of albums that were mixed in QSound, there's a link in the description below to QSound Labs website and a list of albums. It was also used on a couple of films, a Pink Floyd concert video and 1991's Robin Hood Prince of Thieves. You can see the QSound logo in the end credits. A handful of TV shows used it too, including The X-Files. Artists who've used QSound include Bryan Adams, Ice Cube, Tom Jones, Janet Jackson, Paula Abdul, Kiss, Paul McCartney, Sting, Toto and many more. Two of the most well-known examples are Michael Jackson's Dangerous and the very first album ever mixed in QSound, The Immaculate Collection, Madonna's 1990 Greatest Hits album. If you want to hear a simple example of the QSound effect and have a two-speaker setup at home, you can pop on this album's mix of Vogue, and you'll hear what QSound is doing with Madonna's voice at the start. Although a greatest hits album, the whole thing was remixed in QSound. Into the Groove is probably my favourite Madonna track. This album's edit, while not my preferred version, showcases a few QSound effects. This was a completely new edit for the album, along with Like a Prayer and Express Yourself. Most tracks with the original versions just mixed for QSound. Material Girl has a new outro to make the most of the effect. Interestingly, Slash's autobiography mentions QSound when talking about the Use Your Illusion albums.
We decided to hire Bob Clearmountain, a guy whose credentials spoke for themselves. He'd mixed everyone from the Kinks to Bowie, to the Stones to Springsteen. We had a lot of material for him to start on, while Axl continued to work on what wasn't finished yet. Clearmountain came in and talked endlessly about QSound 5.1, a technology that was still in its formative stages. He was really into it, and I remember that he got Axl pretty excited about it too. That was all great, but I wasn't having it at all. QSound sounded like a wash to me. I didn't care that Bob insisted it was the future. To hear it properly required 5 speakers, and especially back then, in the early 1990s, most people only had 2. And if you listened to something mixed in QSound through 2 speakers, it sounded like an indistinct mess.
Clearmountain ended up being fired due to creative differences, and QSound wasn't used, so Slash never had to press the issue. But clearly either Clearmountain or Slash misunderstood the technology, because as far as I'm aware it was never referred to as QSound 5.1, at least not for music mixing, and the technology was specifically designed for 2-speaker setups. So back to Capcom arcade games. Well, a great deal of Capcom arcades in the 90s used QSound, which many of you have probably realised due to seeing one of its many logo screens and jingles when starting up a game. Capcom used it with its CPS and CPS2 arcade hardware, as well as the Sony ZN1 and ZN2, which were used with games like Rival Schools, Street Fighter EX and Battle Arena Toshinden 2. This list of Capcom games that used QSound is huge, and I'll put a fuller list on screen, but some huge titles there: Marvel vs Capcom, X-Men vs Street Fighter, the Alpha series, Dungeons & Dragons, Darkstalkers. Capcom produced various cabinets for this purpose, as you can see from this QSound virtual audio documentation. Some variants even had the QSound branding on the speaker grills. The manual for the Punisher arcade game states that the audio output on the CPS2 board is for use with a Capcom QSound cabinet only, but this was really just for branding purposes, as it would work on any cabinet with a 2-speaker stereo setup. Inside the cab, the audio out on the arcade board feeds into these RCA inputs on the QSound decoder here. These cables then output the processed sound to the left and right speakers. If you stand at the sweet spot in front of one of these cabs, or set it up at home with a 2-speaker setup, you can definitely hear the QSound effects in action. And how effective would this be in a busy arcade with all the other noise going on? I'd say it was probably drowned out. I'm not sure how much Capcom paid to license and implement this technology, but I can't help but wonder if it was an unnecessary expense given the overall noise level of your typical 90s arcade. I did read that Capcom actually owned a piece of the company though, so that may have been a factor in its adoption. A few other gaming companies used QSound for home video games. On PC, several studios implemented it: Bullfrog, EA, Psygnosis and Activision to name a few. In 1993, Sega started using QSound for games on the Mega CD. The first game was Echo the Dolphin, and it was used on 8 Mega CD games overall, including Sonic CD. A couple of 32X games used it too. A lot of Saturn and Dreamcast games use QSound as well. Unsurprisingly, a lot of Capcom's arcade ports of games that use QSound in the arcade. So games like Marvel Superheroes vs Street Fighter, X-Men vs Street Fighter, Darkstalkers, Marvel vs Capcom and Street Fighter 03. But a fair few original games for those consoles implemented QSound too. For example, Nights into Dreams and Sonic R on the Saturn, and Skies of Arcadia and Sonic Adventure on the Dreamcast. The PlayStation had a few games with QSound, a few Capcom games including Rival Schools and Plasma Sword, which were both Sony ZN2 arcade games, which makes sense as the arcade board was based on the PlayStation architecture. There were others too, including several Psygnosis games. The Dreamcast seems to be the last use of the technology in this form. By the turn of the century, QSound was pretty much abandoned, having been surpassed by more advanced technology. It did however morph into Q3D, a follow-on form of the tech which was and is primarily used in mobile phones and Bluetooth headsets to produce 3-dimensional sound. But there you go, that was a brief rundown of the QSound technology that we've all seen countless times on arcade intros but didn't necessarily know what it meant. I realised this was very much a layman's explanation of things, but hopefully it gave you the gist and you can research it further if you're interested. Right, I'm off to play some Capcom arcade games. Thanks for watching.